It's my pleasure to introduce the former pilot of the Roadshow podcast, Volkswagen Carmen Ghia, Tom Mischke. Hi, Tom.
Hey, this is pretty surreal, you guys. I feel like Rip Van Winkle. Just woke up and I'm back in this building with familiar faces, and it's been a long time. I mean, not only 11 years of my last career, the Road Show, but then 4 years at CCO before that and a year at City Pages before that, till we get back to when I was with you people.
Yeah.
Which would have been the end of 2008.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's, Tom, when we had a brief conversation, I think it was in the hallway, about you riding the rails. And I want to tell you my story so I can tell you why I'm so fascinated with this. I know some people in the early 80s, a group of 4 kids, 3 guys and a gal, my brother-in-law Larry, his sister Deb, 2 friends, Brian and John. Their mom gave them a ride to the depot in Staples. They hopped on a freight car, rode it all the way to Seattle, then hitchhiked down to San Francisco, then rode a bus to Denver, then hitchhiked back home. Took them about 6 weeks. So I hear these stories at every family gathering, and the one story I always tell them is about you, but I don't know if I got it right. I think you told me that you hopped on a freight train, or you tried to, a boxcar, you threw your shit in, and the train was going too fast. You couldn't get all the way in. You jumped on, and you were hanging in a boxcar with your ass out the door, and you couldn't get yourself all the way in the door. Am I right?
There are elements of that are accurate. It's worse than this. First of all, a few beers were involved. Let's just start there.
Okay.
And it was me trying to get back from Whitefish, Montana to the Twin Cities. And I got on fine in Whitefish, Montana. I did fine, and I was on a perfectly good boxcar doing just fine. What happened was, at one point it stopped in the middle of the night, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, for no reason, which trains will do. Freight trains will do that. I never quite understand. Sometimes it's to move over to let another train pass, but this night there was no other train. There was a niece who wanted a flattened coin from my trip.
Sure.
And I had forgotten about it. I had been out west and had never thought about that she needed this coin. I thought, here's the perfect opportunity. I'm going to jump off. I'm going to set a quarter on the rail. When it starts up, the wheel's going to go over it. I'll pick up the quarter, jump on the train. We'll be fine. It takes a while for a train to pick up any momentum. I would have time for that. So it was all set. I had the quarter there. The train starts to roll. It's about 3 a.m. It's pitch black out in the Rockies. And I reach down and I scoop up the quarter, and as I pick it up, I drop it into some rocks or something. And I go, okay, still have a little bit of time. This thing's not going to pick up speed for a while. I'm poking around. The boxcar passes me. That's okay. There are other cars on this thing I can jump on. My pack is in the boxcar.
Yeah.
But I'll get that later. Found the quarter and looked up, and I said, well, that's not the right car to jump on there. Let's wait a couple more. Here's a flatbed with a semi on it. This should be good. But I'd have had a few beers, and the thing was moving at a pretty good clip now. And my initial attempt to jump on failed, and I fell and tumbled a bit. Now I'm up running along it going, uh-oh, I may have made a colossal blunder here. And I just got to leap on it, and I get up to my waist, but now the train is moving at such a rate that there's sort of a force kind of drawing my legs more under it. And as I try to swing them around, and I'm bundled up, it's a cold night, I can't swing them around. And all of a sudden I realize I have 2 choices: ride back to Minneapolis like this, or push myself off this train not knowing what I'm going to tumble into or fall against.
Yeah.
And because it was just pitch black out, I ended up pushing myself off, saying I'll save myself and say goodbye to my backpack. And I tumbled down this huge ravine into some rocks by a river, and the train went by, and I stood there in the middle of the Rockies saying, Mishki, you have done it now. What the hell are we going to do?
God. Oh my God. I can't even.
It's a lonely feeling.
So what? I just need to know how the story ended.
I ended up walking the tracks in grizzly country, just walking for miles and miles and miles, knowing I have to stay on the track. I go off it and I'm lost.
Yeah.
And I walked almost to sunlight. But at one point, I found a town that had nothing but a bar and a gas station. And you know how you used to hang on gas stations those plastic things that would say what gas costs? They were kind of like, they were almost like tarp material, and then it would change and they put up another tarp. I pulled that thing down, wrapped myself up in it, and slept until I heard cars moving on a nearby highway and hitchhiked back to Whitefish, Montana, got on another train and went home.
Wow.
I can't.
So the mountains you're referring to, it's Glacier Park.
Yeah, I don't know how far out Glacier Park goes. I'd gotten on at about 9, and this was about 3 in the morning. I don't know if I would have still been considered in Glacier.
I think you would have,
Okay.
because it comes out on a plane right where
Then I still, if it's Glacier from where the foothills start on, I wasn't to the foothills yet. I was definitely in the thick of the Rockies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be the Blackfoot Indian Reservation, which, by the way, is the nicest reservation in the country. Really, really nice place there.
Now, is it the Blackfoot who were allowed to have their original?
Yes.
And that's why it's nice. Because if you got to keep your original land, so many of those guys were moved around as the nice land was taken. But a few were allowed. I think the Crow also in Montana were allowed to keep their land because they would agree to be scouts for the U.S. Yeah.
So I started recently watching the Roadshow episode 150. That Montana feeling. And I stopped right away. I stopped 9 minutes in because I didn't want to hear any of the stories ahead of time.
Ah, okay.
But what I want to do is talk about that burning, because I have the same thing. That burning, you said chasing the sunset. The way you had to go to Montana, you didn't have any choice. You just had to do it as a kid.
Yeah.
And then all the adventures you had, including meeting a certain somebody in Butte who became a close friend of yours.
Yeah, the West was still, even that late in life, we're a long ways past the days of the frontier, but the West was still this wild world to me as a teenager. There was still this sense that if I went east, it'd be people, it'd be cities. Yeah. And if I went west, maybe there aren't even the same rules out there. Maybe there aren't any rules. And so at 17, I got on my first freight train and headed out into that world. And it was everything I imagined it would be, because Montana was in another time. It wasn't in its modern time. It was from some other era.
Yeah.
And some of the towns were, Butte, Montana was the place I fell in love with. And that was the license plates in that town say Butte, America. They don't even consider themselves in Montana. They're like some other world.
Yeah. Big mining town.
Yeah. That at one time was one of the richest in the world, but with the mines down when I was there, it was really economically depressed, which was great for me, because all of a sudden you can rent a place for $80 a month and you can live working 2 days a week at the Silver Dollar Saloon, working the door, which is going to be very difficult for people to believe, but in essence, I was a bouncer. Without question, the last person in the world qualified.
The most chill bouncer.
To be a bouncer.
Yeah, I really have never hit anybody. I don't really like hitting people.
Hey, kiddo, you look old enough to hold your liquor. Come on in.
Well, and you strike me, from everything I know about you, which is not obviously exhaustive, like the least judgmental person on the planet. So you had to assess people walking in and decide if they should be there.
Yeah, the reason that they were okay with me doing this was mostly it was a music bar, which was what I loved about it, live music, and then mostly I was checking IDs and taking the cover. And all the bartenders were women. So I was the only guy there. Oh. And the only one to really ever cause me a lot of trouble was a woman who almost put me flat out on my back with her right to my face. Now, it was a sucker punch. I was turned the other way. But she came in, she was hammered already, and she was big. And big women in Montana can beat up any regular guy in Minnesota.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Easy.
probably have. And she came in and she said, yeah, I just want to check out the band. I might not stay, so I don't want to pay the cover. I'm just going to look around a bit and leave. And I said, yeah, I mean, everybody could say that. I can't really allow that. And I turned to the women bartenders and said, I was just picking up, this woman was drinking. I turned to the women bartenders and said, we might have some trouble. And before I could get trouble out, right to the face, the fist.
Wow.
And after that, the two women acted as though they do this every day. They flipped. This was my first night, by the way. This is my very first night. They flipped over the bar, one-armed, grabbed her, picked her up, threw her out the door. I actually watched her skip across the sidewalk, kind of like a ball. And when she got up, she said, well, you guys made a colossal blunder there. And she ran to the plate glass window of the bar, put her fist through it, and shattered the whole thing. Wow. That was night one in Butte, Montana, working the door at the Silver Dollar Saloon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was your MO? You would travel to a place, get a job, hang out a while, and then move on?
Yeah, although I stuck around there for a while because Butte was just... I could go on and on about Butte. I mean, the bar I was in at night, you could open a trap door and you could go down into this tunneling system that went under the city that the Chinese built for their opium dens back at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And we would find all these old 1905, 1910 opium pipes, and we found gambling rooms where they gambled and go under the... I mean, there's so much fun to be had in that town. For a young guy.
Were those dens for, were the Chinese working in the mine or was it railroad?
The Chinese had come out there on the railroad, but here's how bad. They had built a Chinatown. It was the biggest Chinatown in the United States between there and San Francisco's Chinatown. And it was the alleys. The Chinese were allowed to create these elaborate Chinatowns in the alleys. They weren't allowed to do business on the sidewalk. And this was one of the brutal things I learned when I was there. If you killed a Chinese guy in 1910 in Butte, Montana, it was a $50 fine.
Jeez.
Are you kidding?
No, you got fined.
Jesus.
So it was pretty rough for them there. But there's quite an elaborate Chinese history there. It was pretty fascinating. So
they still have prostitution there?
They still had prostitution. The brothels were still up when I was there.
Yeah.
And there was we're talking 3-story, 4-story buildings, room after room after room,
Yeah.
So the miners, you didn't have to go looking for a girlfriend. And I don't know that you would have had much luck finding one anyway in that town. Mike Veck bought a team there at one point, He bought a minor league team there, Mike Veck, formerly owner of the St. Paul Saints. He bought the Butte Copper Kings, and he went out there with Murray on the first day, and he brought his wife. And his wife did not want out of any town in the world faster than she wanted out of that town. I mean, women just, I don't think, liked it there at all.
Do you blame them?
I can't imagine why. It sounds delightful.
This, I'm assuming, is the town where you met my boyhood hero. I mean, there's a poster of him hanging within my sight in my studio.
Oh, yeah. That was the other reason to stick around, Kenny. I'm so glad you said that because I would not have remembered that.
Robert Knievel.
Yeah, Evel Knievel was born and raised there, and he was living there when I was there. And I could get up in the morning, go down to Jerry's Corner Bar at 10 a.m., and it would be he and I, and that's it, sitting at the bar. Now, I wouldn't normally go to the bar then. I'm not a raging alcoholic, but I wanted to be where Evel was, and I would see his Laconda parked there. You know that sports car? Laconda, it's like nothing I've ever seen before.
From the 70s, super funky.
Yeah. And I'd see it outside Jerry's Corner Bar at 10 a.m., and I'd say, I'm going in there. First day I sat next to him. I just pulled up a stool right next to him at the bar. He must have thought, there's a lot of room in here. There's nobody else in the bar. What are you doing? But I sat next to him, and the first thing he did is turn to me, and he opened up his mouth, and I said, this is going to be great. Evel's first words. I am ready, man. What is he going to say? Is he going to talk about Wembley?
Yeah.
So he turns, and he says... it's complete bullshit that electric razors can't cut your skin. They can. You can get a cut with an electric razor. They pitch these things as though they don't cut you. That's bullshit.
What the hell?
I don't know.
Says
I'll never
the guy that jumped over the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's what.
What? That is... So, did you treat him like every other random that you would meet, or did you didn't faint at his feet?
No,
obviously.
no. I mean, I was sitting next to a guy who, much like you, was my hero. I was jumping trash cans as a kid with my Stingray,
Yeah,
and this was my
yeah.
hero. And but no, I tried to play it cool. But I will say that I went to Jerry's bar often, and we got to know each other. And he was a down to earth guy. He didn't really look at people based on status, especially in Butte. Butte, you were
Right.
just a Butte guy. Years later, when I was on the radio, all I had to do was call his agent and say, yeah, I want to talk to Evel. Okay, well, I'll let you know we can fit that in. Why don't you give me your number? And I'd say, I used to live in Butte. Oh, you just moved to the top of the list. Yeah. And I could always talk to Evel. It was great.
Yeah, and if I remember right, some of the stories he would call you at home.
He did. He used to call me at home. I remember one time I was changing my kid's diaper, and my wife yelled down from downstairs, Tommy, Evel's on the phone. And you say that like it's like this is a
Like
normal.
the devil calling.
Just another day.
And one time I was with him. He was visiting the city, marketing a clothing line, leather motorcycle garb, and he was with his 35-year younger girlfriend, and he was out of his mind. He had so many bizarre ideas and thoughts, and he said to me, Mishke, let me tell you something. You know the way the world's going to end? The Chinese are going to build a bomb. And it's not going to be a normal bomb. It's going to be like a cobalt bomb. You know, I don't know if you know about cobalt, but it's going to be a cobalt bomb. It's going to be so powerful that it splits the planet in two. In two. And all I'm hoping is that me and my little gal here are on the same half. Well, I'll tell you, Tommy, better get used to eating rice. And that was how Evel talked. I mean, and you never knew what to say. He said, let me write that down. Okay, Earth is going to split into. Make sure you are on the same half as your family members.
Did you know him at all at the end of his life?
When he suddenly, inexplicably, with 15 minutes left before he died, became a Christian.
Yeah.
He is the classic. I mean, that is Evel just at the end going, okay, I am totally screwed. I have lived a life of debauchery. I have committed every sin known to man. There's this Robert Schuller guy at Garden Grove, California, Crystal Cathedral. I'll get together with him, and I'll turn my life over to Jesus with 20 seconds left before I die of liver failure. Oh!
Tom, and I just told the guys at GL this off the air a couple of weeks ago. This is my dream. My whole life, all I've wanted was a 15-minute notice so I could get right with God and then check out. And he did it. He did it on behalf of all the sinners.
He pulled it off.
Tommy, here's what occurred to me as I was reading back through your biography and all the people you've talked to. I read this article where you ended up going with, I can't remember who it was, Steve Marsh maybe, to like some building,
a castle
that a convict that you knew owned, right?
Yeah, on the St. Croix.
Yes. And it occurred to me through all the stories about you, how are you not, as I said earlier, you are not judgmental at all. You sort of just take people where they're at. Where did that come from?
My mother, I have to give complete credit to her. Growing up, no matter what, and we grew up during a time when you cross the threshold from the 50s, 60s world to the 70s world, that whole, I mean, our poor parents watched the world just get weird on them. And I can't tell you the freaks that were allowed into our house growing up. And but my, and I'll say my dad too. I remember one time, this was in the early 70s. My dad had bought the Villager newspaper in St. Paul. He was a newspaper man. We're sitting around Sunday brunch, and 10 of us. And he hired a new editor. Guy's name was Cal. And we're eating. I'm picking up a fork full of eggs, bringing it up to my mouth, and my dad turns to my mom and said, I learned today Cal's gay. And this is 1972 or 3, and, I'm thinking to myself, what's gay? So I ask, and we end up having this big conversation around the table about this, and I'm 10 years old, and not anything, which I think would have been unusual then, not anything said at all that even would have said that there was anything odd or different
Right.
about that.
Right.
And that was very typical. I remember my sister, we were a big Catholic family. First person ever that my dad's dear daughter dates is a Jewish guy, and he was kind of a nuts Jewish guy, and he was kind of out of control Jewish guy, and nothing said about that. Nothing. And again, in the early 70s, that was unusual. So I think I had pretty cool parents.
When I was raised in a Catholic family also, and we were raised, we're almost the same age.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember it being, to back up your story, it was a lot judgier then.
Oh, yeah.
About being gay, about being Jewish, about all of those things. And to come from that sort of family in that time period is unusual.
There's something I got to say about that it just goes right into my head when you say that. Steve Cannon, who was Jewish, and I don't know how many people know that, but he was Jewish, and he always used to tell me, Mishke, the thing about being Jewish is you'll be sitting around with some guys, and this is how it kind of comes out. A guy will say, yeah, I got a new barber today. I got tired of the old barber. I didn't think he was very good, so I got this new guy. He's over down on West 7th Street, Jewish fella. Anyway, he cuts my hair.
What is that?
Cannon said
Why is
somewhere
that?
it will always be just thrown in.
Just a random fact.
You never say a Norwegian dude or
No,
a
you
German.
wouldn't. No, you never would. And my dad was Jewish. My mom was Catholic.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was definitely a thing.
Cannon's wife was Catholic. There's a lot of Jewish
There's
Catholic.
a lot of
That's-
that. You know why? Because they come from the same all the guilt and twice the shame background.
Yeah, I actually had another theory on it. So I used to have all these rabbis who listened to my show at night at KSTP, and they did secretively. They were Lubavitch, Hasidic, highly Orthodox, conservative, and they didn't think they should be listening to me. But secretly, throughout the week, one would say something that would indicate he had possibly listened to me. And the other would say, you didn't get that from that guy's show at night. You listen to? Yeah, I listened to. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I met this other rabbi who listened. Oh, he does? Okay. Well, eventually they would invite me over to their houses for Jewish holidays. And what I saw was Catholic world in two key ways. 500 kids running around because they all had 14, just like everybody when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And the kids, the 14-year-olds sneaking liquor out of the cabinet, and the dads are going, ha, 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 that's old.
That's my boy.
That's my boy. He's going to be a great kid. It was just that same world, plus an incredible sense of humor, which seems to come with being Jewish. I haven't met a guy yet who doesn't have a good wit.
Yeah, I think culturally they're much more similar than anybody knows because I grew up in that same environment that they were more similar than different.
Absolutely.
And I do love the sense of humor. That's what we came away from it. I think maybe too, this is going too deep, but the Catholics and the Irish Catholics in particular, when they came here, were so sort of oppressed and marginalized, as were the Jewish people, have a history of that there is some sort of meeting in the middle sort of thing they do.
I don't want to piss anybody off in Minneapolis, but in Minneapolis, there was an incredible anti-Semitic streak for years and years and years. I mean, good luck being a Jewish guy and getting into a golf club, private club. Humphrey came along and as mayor of Minneapolis and changed that. But there was, and there's a woman who wrote a book on this, on the history of the two cities. There was not nearly that in St. Paul because the Catholics had a different relationship with Jews than Protestants did.
Okay.
Catholics held them in a higher regard. And it was not the same thing. So, I don't know if in Minneapolis proper there was a Jewish neighborhood. I mean, I know that St. Louis Park, but in St. Paul there would have been Jewish neighborhoods like Highland Park. It was just a safer place if you were Jewish back in the 30s and 40s.
Right. Should we take a break, Ken, and we'll come back?
Let's do that. We'll be right back. Tom, when I got married at 29, I thought, well, that part of my life is over and I'll miss it. Because I was going full throttle in my 20s, just like you were. And then I married somebody and I thought, well, it's over. Well, she was going full throttle too. So we just had more fun. And then we had a kid, and when she was pregnant, I thought, well, that part of my life is over. It'll never be the same. And then the day that he was born, I realized this is what life is all about. And I will never, ever yearn for those old days again, because this is what I want to do. So fast forward to a few months ago when I knew you were coming on board, I started listening to old episodes of Roadshow, and I had to pause the tape during your show about Kerouac, a hero of mine and obviously of yours.
Yeah.
And I think this quote is you. You said this, and it pretty much sums up life. The thrills in life wait all along the road, along with the heartaches and anguish. Don't go reaching for a thrill you've already had. You'll end up missing the one waiting up ahead. And that pretty much describes my life right up until today.
It's interesting, too, that you said that about your feeling when your wife and you had your first child. Keith Richards said that was the moment he found the meaning of life. The birth of his first kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my joke at the time was, and it was just a joke, I said, if I had known that having a kid was going to be this fulfilling, I would have knocked up some chick in high school. Oh, great. That's a funny joke. But it
true.
wouldn't have been the son that I have now, who I can't imagine living without.
Yeah, I got married the same age, 29. So we had very similar runs in those 20s.
I didn't think I was going to live past 30, Tom. And
No,
here we are.
Shouldn't. I think it's fair to say maybe shouldn't be alive, given a few.
Yeah.
Well, you guys talk more about what that means. So what changed? What did having a child change?
It made everything that I cared about seem pointless. Well, not pointless, but they went way, way down in stature. Nothing, any sacrifice. People talk about, I don't get any sleep. Didn't matter. Run on 2 hours of sleep every day for 3 years. And the only thing that mattered was this kid. And still to this day, 25 years later, it's all that matters to me.
Yeah, it's funny because when you fall in love with a woman and you are going down the aisle, you still don't really understand love yet because it's something you got to learn over time. You can say you're in love and some form of it is there certainly, but it's something that has to be learned over a long period of time and it has to grow over a long period of time. The second a child appears, you know what it is. You know what it is in that moment. And that first time, I remember I actually had the experience of looking at, let's just say, an arm of this brand new baby and realizing that there's literally no difference between that arm and my own arm. You know, if you were to poke something into that arm, it would be going into my arm. And there was that immediate realization that there's no distance between us. This is me, I'm it. Whatever happens to this new thing is happening to me.
Yeah.
And that is the birth of love, that oneness, that sense of there aren't two anymore, there's just one. And that's a wake-up call.
I so appreciate that, and I also think for me, because I have a child almost the same age as Kenny, I went from being all centered about me and what I wanted to do in this moment or the next moment and all of that, to suddenly there was something on the planet more important than me.
Right.
And something I was willing to sacrifice literally anything, which was the first time in my life I could have said that.
Yeah, and it's sometimes I think we should do something with that realization. I mean, there's a sort of a lesson in there for the whole world, really, right there, is that is a feeling that if we could ever get it to grow beyond just our own kids could be pretty powerful in this world.
Because it's selflessness. It's a selflessness that I did not possess in any way, shape, or form before that. And I remember my son had a bear that he loved named Barzy. And I remember saying to people, and I meant it, which would not have been true before he arrived on the planet, I would throw myself in front of a train for Barzy.
Yeah. The two kinds of love that I think the intensity is such that if we could figure out how to move it into other areas of life are the love of a parent for a child, and then the second one is the love of soldiers on a battlefield with each other. If you could take those deep sensations and move them out in a larger way to the greater world, we would be better off. But I always look at those two as kind of the most intense.
We'd be in a different place.
Yeah.
I also would add into that the way that, because I've learned a lot about stillness and acceptance from animals. animals just don't wake up in the morning and go, I feel fat. You know? Yeah. They just do them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't go, is my butt big? Do you think this looks good on me?
Yeah. They're unburdened by that.
No, they
stuff.
just,
Yeah.
and they don't think any further ahead than in the moment that they're living in.
Did you guys ever see the movie Scanners?
No.
Nope.
Oh my God, it's a great cult film. Do you know it, Reavers? Scanners?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah, it's this crazy movie with William Hurt where he does acid or something and goes in one of these deprivation tanks and has this hallucination of being like an animal, almost like an ape. He's just it's so hard for me to explain, but I'll just say when he comes back into reality, he said, I was just an animal the entire time. All I thought about was eating, sleeping, and mating. It was the happiest I've ever been in my life.
Right.
And you believed it. You went, wow,
Yeah,
that's
no
right. There aren't a lot
complications.
of worries there, are there?
Yeah. I think as humans, we make things way too complicated.
So about Roadshow,
Yeah.
how did you, the mechanics of that, were you just out on the road traveling and talking to randos, or did you go somewhere specifically with a person that you already planned to meet?
I had a system, and for folks who don't know, I quit. I walked away with 2 days' notice from WCCO doing a night show there. I was completely burned out. I was just never going to be in a little studio again every single day doing a radio show, and I had to find something else. So I came up with this idea of traveling, mostly because I wanted to travel, and just running into eccentric, odd, iconoclastic people on the fringe, on the margins, people just living lives that are wildly different from me or my listeners. And the people who were my sources were barbers and bartenders. I just learned in every town, barbers and bartenders know everybody. So just go to them and ask them, and if they lead you to a guy who's not the guy, that guy will lead you to the right guy. You just follow that line.
Yeah.
And that always worked. Every now and then when I struck out with them, I would contact a local newspaper reporter and say, who's the most interesting fella you ever ran across in this town?
Yeah. Yeah. One guy, and I don't remember which episode it was, hated people. He was very well. Did you know one time?
Orcas Island, off Puget Sound.
Yeah. Yeah. But he was, oh my God, he was brilliant. A really smart guy.
He was
but
really
just-
smart, too smart. That's the danger. See, that's that animal thing again. That's the double-edged sword of being too smart.
Is that how you found him? Just randomly?
I had heard on that island. I was traveling around Orcas Island trying to find people. I just thought that you're going to find an eccentric on an American island. I mean, I didn't even know there were these San Juan Islands, I think they're called.
They're marvelous. Yeah.
So I find this guy, and just the way he talks about people who own dogs. He would just say to me, I can't stand it when I come up to people with dogs. You ever been around them? No. Because I just go mad. And people were just driving him crazy. Or people would walk up, it's a beautiful day today. Oh, God, I hear that. He was not meant to be around humanity. But you're right, he
Sounds
spoke.
like me.
Actually, some elements did remind me of. He spoke several languages, though. He had been in intelligence in the military, and he was a fairly brilliant guy. And I felt lucky to talk to him because I thought I only have a short period of time before I'm the annoying person. I better make good use of it here.
I would suggest people who, I think the smarter you are as a person, I think the harder it is to be happy.
Yeah,
That's my conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the universal truth, but I think that people, the smarter you are, the more you overthink things, and the harder it is to find a peaceful place to live.
Yeah, people who have depression are generally higher in intelligence. I just did a thing on, I've only been doing a show here. I think I've done 4 shows, and I just did one, either the last show or the one before here on my GL podcast, where I talked about a buddy of mine who drives a beer truck, and I'm sorry I called him this, but I did. I called him kind of a dim-witted fella, but in a good way. But
believe me, you've called me much worse.
But
Believe
a lovely
me.
man. But his big insights into life are, God, look at this apple. The greatest thing about these things is you don't have to peel them. That's why I like them so much more than bananas. There's just no effort here. And he's having
So
his most
true.
exciting moment of his day as he's talking about this, and that's as sophisticated as the conversations we'll get with him. But boy, happiest man I've ever met. Married and in love and just loves life.
I think I've come to the conclusion in my long life that I think if you get too smart, you forget about awe.
Yeah.
You forget to just look at things and go, wow,
I
look
did
at that.
I did a whole road show on awe when I went and saw that last eclipse down in Texas. That was awe is a good thing to make sure exists somewhere in your life.
Always.
Yeah.
Because
Always.
other's you're cynical. I've
Yeah, that's
seen it
the
all.
worst,
I've
too.
heard it all.
That's the worst.
It's just not a happy place to be.
Bukowski had a quote. Charles Bukowski had a great quote I just read the other day having to do with this. He said something like, people pick their spouses as someone to grow old with together, and that's a mistake. You want to pick your spouse to find someone to be a child with together.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really good. How do you prefer to travel? Alone or together?
Yeah,
in the air or in a car?
For the road show or in general?
Just in life.
Well, I love traveling with my wife. We're traveling is the most fun thing, but it's not the traveling like other people where our traveling is give me the dumpiest motel in the weirdest part of town with the oddest person working the front desk and the dumpiest bar down the street. And I'm very happy I'm not going to be a Riviera guy, but
that's where all of my memories with my wife come from.
Yeah.
Just the hellholes.
right,
And the wonderful time
just
we had.
weird, the weirdness of it all. I mean, I thankfully, one thing I found in the road shows, America is still weird. I got worried that it would become too homogenous over time and we'd lose the quirky, odd, eccentric oddballs that this country was built on.
Yeah.
But they're out there.
I got to ask you a really blunt question before we go to break about your wife. Mm-hmm. You're weird.
Yeah.
Who is she?
Yeah.
And how does she put up with you?
That's what all my buddies say. All my buddies, they marvel at it, and they're not joking. Some guys joke, but they are not joking. They actually don't understand it. And I feel bad about this because, I hope I haven't made her life too miserable. I've made it challenging, but she's a good old Irish gal. The Irish are pretty good.
Stout.
Yeah, they're...
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Is
she's...
she
mentally.
weird like you, or is she the counterbalance?
Well, I'll tell you, she's certainly been game to get in trouble with me. When we were dating, we went out to the airport one night about 3 a.m, and we climbed up the baggage chute. There was nobody around. I thought, where is everybody? And we went up the baggage chute, and we got into a plane, into the cargo thing of the plane, and then we got into the cockpit, and the running lights were on, and it was on the tarmac. And the crazy thing was, we climbed off it later after pretending to drive it. And
Oh, my God.
After doing all that, we got off it later. But on the way back to St. Paul, we got pulled over by a trooper. And he did some stuff with us where we had to walk a line and touch our nose thing. We passed, and we got to keep going. But that record of us helped get us caught. Within 48 hours, I was dealing with a FAA special agent because they had picked it up on the cameras later, and then they tied it into the 2 people who got pulled over by the state trooper.
Oh.
So we were called out there, and it was during the time of the TWA hijacking in Beirut. Remember the classic one where the pilot has his elbow out the window, this cool customer pilot?
Yep.
And all airports all over were on high alert. And what we had done is shown a terrible, terrible flaw in the Northwest Airlines system. At the time, it was Northwest. And they were fined thousands and thousands of dollars. And we were told, do not tell a soul what you did. If you don't tell anybody, if you don't go to the media, she was a newspaper editor, I was a writer at the time, so that was a good thing to warn us about. We won't prosecute you. And so we made a deal with them. And what drove me nuts is within about a week, 2 high school kids were on Ted Koppel for more or less doing the same thing and exposing the terrible security at airports. And,
if that would have been a movie, you would have been hired as a consultant and then made millions checking security at airports around the world. That's how life in Hollywood would be.
I'll tell you, an FAA special agent is the scariest human being you'll ever stand at. He was 6'5". He never took off his aviator sunglasses ever, and he put the. But what was funny was. We had to walk him through how we did it. I want to know exactly how you got on a plane. I want to know everything you did. And every time we'd come to some part where my wife and I disagreed what happened, he said, yeah, you shut up. Ma'am, go ahead.
Smart man.
That's marriage right there.
Right.
We're going to take one more break, and we'll be right back with Tom.
Well, we're back with Tommy Mischke on the Krabby Coffee Shop podcast. Tommy, one of the things I really love that you've done recently is the book you wrote called Winter Song. Mm-hmm. And you talk about in that book something that makes me so happy, but also makes me a pariah amongst people who, even those who live in Minnesota. If you say in this town that you love winter, it's like if people say to me, I don't like dogs, then I don't like them anymore. Right. If you say you like winter, people just kind of look at you like, I don't know if I like you. I love winter. It's why I returned to Minnesota. And I think it's so, and you talk about it in your book, but I want to know more. I think it's formative to who we are.
Yeah, I don't think you can separate winter from our personalities as Northerners. I mean, I think it's built in a way that you would not say that about someone in, you wouldn't say about someone in Alabama, summers define them. Winter has a way, as a season, of creating another planet, another world, and with it another culture in a way warm weather doesn't, because we also have warm weather. So we have those hot, humid days. It's a unique thing that I call it something that hits from about northern Michigan to eastern Montana and then the states that are to the far north. The hard winter. That, you go to California, they call it winter. You go to, Kansas, they call it winter, but we would not call that winter. That'd be, in Kansas, it'd be a long November. Mm-hmm. But, so winter is this other planet. I start the book with that idea. And because it's another planet, it comes with just all sorts of different weird things. But to your point, I do an entire chapter on winter's disciples, those who love winter. And I put a call out for that when I was writing the book. And there should be a secret club, Amy, because I was inundated with people who love winter. And it was for a variety of reasons that you wouldn't even think about. People who never go outside in winter. Doesn't matter what they love about it. 4:30, it gets dark,
yes.
And the world gives you permission to end your day.
Yes.
You pour a glass of wine and you say, well, day's over.
Yep.
And,
absolutely.
Whereas at 9 on a July, 9 p.m. in July, you feel like everybody's still out doing stuff. I should be doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people like that. There are people who love just the quiet of winter, the sense that allows you to quit being this frenetic, crazed human being and just relax a little bit. There's all sorts of things. People have a real spiritual take on winter, that it's when they get introspective, think about their lives, what they're doing with their lives. Summer and spring and fall are more frenetic, more crazy, and we need a counter to that. And the North gets it.
Yep. It's the funniest thing to come back to Minnesota, because I left for warmer climes for like 5 years. I was bored with it. There's a perverse pride that I take in people. When I would leave like warmer climes, they'd be like, why would you go back to Minnesota? That sounds horrible. But there was a perverse pride in knowing that ain't no big deal. Right. I mean, you dress for it, big whoop.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of women I interviewed who said that winter made them feel tougher than they thought they were. And when spring came, they felt like they had really risen to something that they liked about themselves. They liked what that brought out.
The best I've felt in the last year is when we got a snow, we have only gotten 2 or 3 snows, but we got a decent sized snow a couple months ago. And I had just gotten this battery powered snowblower. And I got all dressed for it. And I went outside, and I have kind of a wicked long driveway with a hill. And I did it. And I came back down to the garage and put the snowblower away. And then somebody delivered a bunch of wood for my little campfire. And I just felt like a mountain woman. I felt like I just did that.
Yeah.
I did that. Yeah. And I did. I felt tougher and stronger. And like, if I could do this, I could do anything.
There's a great quote. Someone said, I have it in my book, I don't remember who it was, but it was, if you don't like my winters, you don't deserve my spring. Because in Minnesota, the spring is born out of winter. It's not a separate thing. The reason you feel this drunken ecstasy is because of what you're coming out of. And nobody who doesn't know winter has ever known a spring. You cannot know it except in contrast. So when they say spring in San Diego, it means nothing. It doesn't mean it. It's a word.
No.
Yeah.
It's 78 degrees year-round there.
Yeah, it's really the contrast and that. I mean, I was in Sweden one time when I talked to a guy and we could speak the same language. We both got it. He talked about the drunkenness of spring. Without one drip of alcohol, everybody's drunk.
Right.
You're drunk with the energy of it, the spirit of it, the life of it, just
It
by those
was-
first warm days.
It was overwhelming to me as a teenager. You have a driver's license. I'm in a truck that has a heater with the windows rolled down. It's 40 degrees, but it could just as well be 90 degrees.
Right.
And you just, you've got all those hormones running through you. It's just the best time of the year as a kid.
Absolutely.
Was spring.
Absolutely.
And right now I live out in the country. I really started to hate winter in the Twin Cities just because of all the traffic and parking issues. It's joyous out here.
Yeah.
And I used to put on thousands of miles on a snowmobile, and then I'd load it up and head to the mountains and ride backcountry. Now my big joy in the winter is I bought a truck. I put a plow on it. It is so gratifying plowing snow.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. My driveway goes from absolutely impassable, where you can't even walk up it, to cleared and wide, and it's just...
It's the
You're
most
drinking
amazing
coffee.
feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. And you're in your truck, it's warm, you're drinking coffee with the window down. It's
Yeah.
just the best ever.
There's a whole series of videos on YouTube called Satisfying Videos that you just watch them, and I love them, where they mow a yard or
Yeah.
they trim like shrubs in the perfect shape, and they go from like straggly to beautiful.
Yeah.
That's what that snowplow thing is. It
Yeah.
goes from this one state to you do this thing, and then it's perfection.
Yeah.
You know? Tom, it's been amazing to have you here.
Thank you.
I've known you since I started 20 years ago.
Yep.
And then you moved on 4 years later, but I'm glad you're back. Your book is Winter Song. Plug your new podcast here at Hubbard.
The new podcast comes out every Friday on this lovely GL network, and I am so happy to be a part of it. I have actually been in a state of bliss as far as being back in a radio feel with the show. You know,
Really?
feels like radio to me. Whereas the road show was a whole different animal. Felt almost like I was doing documentaries. This feels like radio, and I haven't had that feeling in a long time. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to offend you, but I think the road show is the best thing anybody has ever done.
A lot of people
Seriously.
hate me for leaving it, but 11
Oh, well-
years, it was time. It was time.
Yeah, no, and you addressed that in the
Yeah,
last couple of
yeah.
episodes, but it really is Americana.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I
Thank
just
you.
love it. And like Amy said, this has been the best hour of my life for a long time.
Thank you. This was a blast.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. And thank you to everybody for listening to the news from the Krabby Coffee Shop.